The only thing moving in the entire living room was the single bead of sweat, tracing a slow, determined path from my temple down to my chin. I was in tree pose, or Vrksasana. My right foot was pressed firmly into my left inner thigh, my hands were pressed together in a prayer position at my chest, and my entire world had shrunk to the size of a postage stamp, a single point on the wall I was staring at to maintain my balance. For 10 minutes, this room had been my sanctuary. The scent of the lavender mat cleaner still hung in the air, a faint, calming perfume. The late afternoon sun cast long, golden rectangles across the floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, silent spirits. My breathing was slow even, a rhythm I had cultivated over years of practice. In, out, in, out. I was an island of peace in the chaotic ocean of suburban life. I was a rock. I was serene. I was about to be annihilated. It started not with a sound, but with a vibration, a low, guttural thrumming that seemed to emanate from the very floorboards beneath my bare feet. It was the bass-heavy prelude to a digital apocalypse. My concentration wavered, the point on the wall blurred. The single bead of sweat, once a symbol of my effort, now felt like a ticking time bomb, threatening to drip and break my fragile focus. Then came the war cry. Not a human war cry, but something synthesized. Something from another world. The roar of a pixelated dragon, followed by the explosive clang of 1,000 imaginary swords. And then, a very real, very teenage groan of utter despair. Ugh, no, he one-shot me. That's such cheap damage. The server is so laggy today, this is impossible. My eyes snapped open. My balance, already teetering, gave out completely. My foot came crashing down onto the mat, and I stumbled forward, catching myself on the arm of the sofa. My sanctuary was breached. My island was being shelled. The war had come to me. Leaning against the door frame to the hallway was my stepson, Leo. He was 16, a lanky collection of sharp angles and sullen energy, currently clad in a black hoodie and pajama pants that had seen better days. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring down at the phone in his hand, his thumbs flying across the screen with a frantic, desperate energy. He was completely oblivious to me. To my yoga, to the fact that he had just single-handedly dismantled 10 minutes of hard-won tranquility with a single well-timed lament about a video game. I took a deep breath, the kind they teach you in yoga, the kind that's supposed to center you and bring you back to the present moment. It didn't work. The present moment smelled faintly of teenage boy and Cheetos, and it was punctuated by the furious tapping of his thumbs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to snatch the phone from his hand and launch it into the neighbor's prized rose bushes. I wanted to say something, anything, that would make him see me, that would make him acknowledge my space, my effort, my existence. Instead, I just stood there, defeated. My mat, once a sacred space, now felt like just another piece of furniture in a house that wasn't entirely mine. This wasn't a new thing. This was our dance, a silent, frustrating, never-ending tango of avoidance and annoyance. I tried to create a pocket of peace, and Leo, with his seemingly sixth sense for serenity, would find it and poke it with a stick until it popped. I'd retreat to my bedroom, rolling out my mat in the cramped space between my side of the bed and the wall. He'd blast his music through the floor. I'd try to meditate in the early morning, before anyone was awake. He'd wake up early, too, drawn by some mysterious internal alarm that went off only when I was seeking silence, and start making breakfast, which involved a lot of cabinet slamming and the clatter of cereal bowls. I loved his father, Mark. I loved him with a depth and a ferocity that sometimes scared me. He was kind and steady, and he saw the world in shades of gray that I, a person of black and white convictions, found both baffling and beautiful. When we got married 2 years ago, I knew I wasn't just marrying him. I was marrying a package deal. A man, a mortgage, and a moody teenage boy who still missed his mom. I tried. Really, I did. In the beginning, I tried so hard it hurt. I was the cool stepmom. I learned the names of the characters in his favorite games, even though they all sounded like they were generated by a random fantasy word generator. I'd offer to buy him skins for his avatar. I'd try to talk to him about school, about his friends, about the new Marvel movie. The conversations were always the same. They were like trying to get blood from a stone. How was school, Leo? Fine. Did you do anything fun in your classes today? Not really. Okay. Well, let me know if you need any help with homework. I won't. And then, silence. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't a comfortable silence. It was a heavy, accusatory silence. It was a wall of solid brick that he had spent years building, and I was just a stranger on the other side, tapping uselessly at it. Mark would try to mediate. "He's just a teenager, Sarah," he'd say, his voice gentle and reasonable. "He's not doing it to be malicious. He's just in his own world. He'll come around. You just have to give him time." Time. I was giving him time. I was giving him so much time I was starting to forget what a real conversation felt like. I was giving him so much time I was starting to feel like a ghost in my own home. A quiet, floating presence that cooked dinner and did laundry and tried, and failed, to connect with the boy who was the center of his father's universe. My life before Mark, before this house, before this constant, low-grade hum of anxiety, was different. I was a corporate lawyer. I worked 80-hour weeks in a high-rise downtown, fueled by caffeine and ambition. I was good at it. I was sharp and aggressive, and I won. But I was also miserable. I had panic attacks in the supply closet. I had an ulcer by the time I was 30. I was so tightly wound I felt like I might snap at any moment, sending shards of myself flying in every direction. Yoga saved me. A friend dragged me to a class, kicking and screaming. I hated it at first. I hated the slow pace, the focus on breathing, the way the instructor's voice was like warm honey, slow and soothing. I wanted to run out of the room and go for a 10-mile run, but I stuck with it, and slowly something began to shift. The panic attacks became less frequent. The ulcer healed. I learned to breathe, really breathe, for the first time in my adult life. I learned that strength wasn't just about being aggressive and winning. It was also about being quiet and still and finding your center in the middle of a storm. When I met Mark, I was a different person. I'd left the law firm and was teaching a few yoga classes a week at a local studio. I was calmer, happier. I was me. Mark loved that about me. He loved my passion for it, my belief in its power to heal and transform. But in this house, with Leo, my yoga felt less like a practice and more like a desperate act of self-preservation. It was the one thing I had left that was just mine, the one piece of the old me, the new me, that I could hold on to. And Leo, with his digital dragons and his Cheeto-dusted fingers, was always there, threatening to take it away. I watched him now, still leaning against the doorframe, completely engrossed in his phone. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his lips moving silently as he muttered strategies to himself. He was in his own world, a world of quests and battles and digital glory, a world I had no entry into, a world I wasn't sure I even wanted to enter. I rolled up my mat, the rubbery sound loud in the quiet room. I didn't say a word to him. I just walked past him, my shoulder almost brushing his, and went into the kitchen. I could feel his eyes on my back for a split second, a flicker of awareness, before they were back on his screen. I opened the fridge and stared inside, not really seeing anything. The cold air felt good on my hot, frustrated face. I was so tired of this. Tired of the silence, tired of the tension, tired of feeling like an intruder in my own home. Something had to give. I couldn't keep retreating, keep shrinking myself to fit into the corners of his life. I couldn't keep letting him win this silent war. And then, an idea started to form. A crazy, ridiculous, probably terrible idea. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about fighting back. It was about something else. It was about not moving. It was about planting my feet right in the middle of his world and just being there. It was about doing my yoga, not in the privacy of my bedroom, not in the empty living room when he was out, but right here, in the middle of it all, in the epicenter of the chaos. I closed the fridge, a new resolve hardening inside me. I wasn't a ghost. I wasn't an intruder. I was his stepmother, and whether he liked it or not, I lived here too. This was my living room too, and tomorrow I was going to do my yoga in it, and I wasn't going to stop, not for a dragon, not for a laggy server, not for anything. The next day, I woke up with a knot of dread in my stomach. It was the same feeling I used to get before a big court case, a mix of fear and adrenaline. I went through my morning routine on autopilot, making coffee, feeding the dog, my mind racing. Mark was already gone, having left early for a meeting. It was just me and Leo, and the silent ticking clock of our mutual animosity. I waited until 10 a.m., the perfect time, late enough that Leo would be awake and settled into his usual spot on the couch, but early enough that I could still claim a decent chunk of the morning for myself. I took a deep breath, unrolled my mat in the center of the living room, right in front of the big screen TV. It was a deliberate act, a declaration of war, or maybe A declaration of peace, I wasn't sure which. I sat down on the mat, closed my eyes, and began my breathing exercises. In, out, in, out. I could hear him, the familiar click-clack of his controller, the low hum of the TV. I could feel his presence on the couch behind me, a heavy, silent weight. I waited for the comment, the groan, the interruption. It came as expected about 5 minutes in. Seriously? His voice was flat, laced with annoyance. You're doing this here? The TV is right there. I didn't open my eyes. I didn't stop breathing. I just kept going. In, out, in, out. I'm trying to watch a stream, he said, his voice a little louder this time. Still, I said nothing. I moved into cat-cow, arching and rounding my spine, a slow, gentle flow. I was a machine, a calm, peaceful, unflappable yoga machine. On the inside, my heart was pounding. My palms were sweating. This was harder than any courtroom I had ever been in. He let out an exaggerated sigh, a hurricane of teenage frustration. I heard him shift on the couch, the leather groaning in protest. Then, he turned up the volume on the TV. The voice of the hyper-enthusiastic streamer filled the room. A barrage of shout-outs and sponsor reads and high-pitched laughter. It was an assault on the senses. It was everything I was trying to get away from. I kept going. Downward-facing dog, my arms started to shake. Not from the exertion, but from the sheer force of my will to stay on that mat. I was holding my ground. I was holding my space. For the next hour, it was a battle of wills. He would make noise. I would hold a pose. He would get up and stomp into the kitchen for a soda. I would flow through a sun salutation. He would accidentally drop his controller on the floor, the clatter echoing through the room. I would move into Warrior 2, my gaze focused, my breath steady. I was a fortress. And he was a relentless, annoying, surprisingly creative army, armed with nothing but a game controller and a bottomless well of teenage apathy. By the time I rolled up my mat, I was exhausted, drained. Every muscle in my body ached, not from the yoga, but from the tension. I had done it, I had survived, but I had no idea if I had won. I had no idea what winning even looked like. This became our new ritual. Every morning I would unroll my mat in the living room. Every morning, Leo would be on the couch, a grumpy, gaming-shaped monument to my presence. Some days were better than others. Some days he would just ignore me, lost in his own world. Other days he seemed to make it his personal mission to disrupt my peace. He would practice his beatboxing, a series of off-kilter, guttural sounds that made my teeth ache. He would watch videos of people failing at parkour, the sound of bones cracking and bodies hitting pavement filling the air. He would have loud, animated conversations with his friends on his headset, his side of the conversation a stream of profanity and gaming jargon I couldn't begin to understand. Dude, no, you gotta flank him, use the frag grenade. I'm covering you, oh man, you're down, that's rough. Buddy, you gotta res me, I'm right here. No, don't run away. You're leaving me for dead? Unbelievable, this is why we lose. I would hold my poses, my face a mask of serenity, while inside I was screaming. I was a method actor playing the role of Zen stepmom, and I was gunning for an Oscar. Mark came home one day in the middle of one of our sessions. He walked in, took one look at me in pigeon pose, one look at Leo on the couch with his headset on, and a slow smile spread across his face. What's going on here? He asked, his voice amused. Yoga, I grunted, my face pressed into the floor. I can see that, he said. Leo, what are you doing? Leo pulled off his headset. Nothing, just watching a stream. It looks like you're in the middle of a very intense, one-sided conversation, Mark said, his eyes twinkling. Was talking to my squad, Leo mumbled, his ears turning red. Well, keep it down, Mark said, ruffling his son's hair. Your stepmom is trying to find her inner peace. Leo shot him a look of pure venom, then put his headset back on, retreating into his digital fortress. Mark came over and knelt down beside me. How's it going? He whispered. It's going, I said, my voice muffled by the carpet. It's a work in progress. He'll come around, he said, echoing the same words he'd said 100 times before. I know, I said, even though I wasn't sure I believed it anymore. Weeks turned into a month. The living room yoga became a fact of life, a strange, unspoken truce in our ongoing Cold War. I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. I stopped bracing myself for the next interruption. I just did my yoga. And he just played his games. We were two planets, orbiting the same sun, never quite touching, never quite acknowledging each other's existence, but coexisting in the same cosmic space. I started to notice things, little things, the way he would unconsciously tap his foot in time with the music I played, the way he would, on rare occasions, lower the volume on the TV without me having to ask, the way he would sometimes watch me, not with annoyance but with a strange, unreadable curiosity when he thought I wasn't looking. One day, I was struggling with a particularly challenging pose, an arm balance called crow pose, or bakasana. I was trying to lift my feet off the ground, my knees perched on the back of my arms, my core engaged. I kept tipping forward, my forehead bumping against the floor. It was a frustrating, humbling pose. I was about to give up, to move on to something easier when I heard a voice. "You're leaning too far forward." I froze. It was Leo. He had taken off his headset. He was looking at me, actually looking at me, his expression not annoyed, but analytical, like he was studying a bug under a microscope. "What?" I said, my voice shaky. "Your weight," he said, gesturing vaguely at me with his controller. "It's too far forward, you need to shift it back, like, way back. Think about lifting your butt up, not just your feet." I stared at him. I had no idea what he was talking about. He knew nothing about yoga. He was a gamer. What could he possibly know about core engagement and center of gravity? But I was desperate, so I tried it. I got back into the pose, my knees on my arms, my hands flat on the mat. I thought about what he said, shifting my weight back, lifting my butt. I took a deep breath, and I pushed, and my feet came off the ground, just for a second, just for a fleeting, wobbly, glorious second, but they were up. I was balancing. I was flying. I came down a little breathless, a lot shocked. I looked at him, my eyes wide. He just shrugged, a casual, almost bored gesture. "It's all about the center of gravity," he said. "It's like in this one game, when you're trying to balance on a narrow ledge. If you lean too far forward, you fall. You gotta find that sweet spot." He put his headset back on, and just like that he was gone, back in his world. But something had shifted. The wall between us, the one I had been tapping at for so long, had a tiny crack in it. A hairline fracture, but a crack nonetheless. The next day when I unrolled my mat, he didn't have his headset on. He was just watching TV, the volume at a reasonable level. I went through my practice, my mind replaying his words from the day before. It's all about the center of gravity. When I got to crow pose, I hesitated. I could feel his eyes on me. I took a deep breath, and I tried it again. And again, my feet lifted off the ground. This time I held it for 2 seconds, then 3. It was still wobbly, still imperfect, but it was mine. I came down, and I looked at him. He was watching me, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "Better," he said, and that was it. That was the beginning. It wasn't a sudden, dramatic change. There was no Hollywood-style montage where we suddenly became best friends, laughing and sharing secrets. It was slower than that, more subtle. A gradual thawing of a frozen landscape. He started to offer more advice, always framed in the language of his world. "That pose, where you're all twisted up, that's like a critical hit. You gotta surprise your opponent from the side. That breathing thing you do? That's like a power-up. It regenerates your health." And I started to listen. I started to see the wisdom in his words, the strange, gamer Zen philosophy he had developed. He wasn't just a moody teenager who played video games. He was a strategist, a problem solver. He saw the world in terms of systems and patterns, of cause and effect, and he was applying that logic to my yoga. One afternoon, I was in the middle of a particularly grueling hold, a variation of chair pose that made my thighs burn like they were on fire. I was shaking, my teeth gritted, sweat pouring down my face. I wanted to quit. I wanted to collapse onto the mat and just lie there. Leo was quiet. He had put his controller down. He was just watching me, his expression unreadable. "You can do it," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "You've got like a sliver of health left. Don't let them finish you off. Just hold on. The power-up is coming." His words, so strange, so out of place, hit me with the force of a revelation. He wasn't just talking about a game. He was talking about me. He was encouraging me. He was on my side. I took a deep breath, and I held the pose. I held it for 10 more seconds. 20. 30. Until the instructor on the video I was following finally said to release. I collapsed onto my mat, my body trembling with exhaustion and something else, something warm and bright and unfamiliar. It was pride. Not just in myself, but in us. In this strange, unexpected connection we had forged in the battlefield of our living room. I looked over at him. He was looking back at me. And for the first time I saw past the sullen teenager, past the gamer, past the wall he had built around himself. I saw Leo. I saw a boy who was smart and funny and kind in his own weird roundabout way. I saw a boy who had been watching me, just as I had been watching him. A boy who had been trying in his own way to connect too. "Thanks," I said, my voice hoarse. He just nodded, a small jerky motion. Then he picked up his controller, and the familiar sounds of his game filled the room again. But it was different now. It wasn't an assault. It was just background noise, the soundtrack to our new, fragile peace. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. The living room yoga was no longer a battle of wills. It was our thing, our weird, wonderful, slightly dysfunctional ritual. I would do my yoga, and he would play his games. But now, there was a dialogue, a running commentary that flowed between his world and mine. He would name my poses after video game characters. "Oh, that's the Dragon Slayer stance. That one's the ninja creep. Okay, now you're doing the final boss power-up." I would play along. "I'm channeling my inner warrior," I'd say, holding a fierce warrior pose. "I'm preparing for battle." "Against what?" he'd ask, his eyes still on his screen. "Against the tyranny of the dirty laundry," I'd say, deadpan. And he would laugh, a real, genuine laugh, not a snort of derision. It was a sound I had rarely heard, and it was like music. One day he did something that surprised me more than anything. I was in the middle of my practice, and he put down his controller. He stood up and walked over to the empty space on the rug next to my mat. "What are you doing?" I asked, pausing in my downward-facing dog. "Trying it," he said, his voice casual, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. He stood there for a moment, awkwardly, his hands shoved in his pockets. He didn't have a mat. He was just in his socks and his hoodie. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral, not wanting to scare him off. "What do you want to try?" "I don't know," he said. "That one. The one where you look like a flamingo." "Tree pose," I said. "Yeah, that one." I talked him through it. "Okay, so you want to shift your weight onto one foot. Good. Now pick up your other foot and place it on your ankle, or your calf, or your thigh. Just avoid the knee." He wobbled a lot. His arms were flailing, his face scrunched up in concentration. He looked like a baby giraffe learning to walk. It was the most awkward, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Now bring your hands to your heart," I said. He did, his hands clasped together in a way that was more prayerful than my own ever were. "Now, pick a point on the wall to stare at," I said. "Something that's not moving." He found his spot. He took a deep breath, and for a second, just a single fleeting second, he was still. He was balanced. He was a tree. Then he wobbled, and his foot came crashing down to the floor. He looked at me, his face a mixture of frustration and pride. "I did it," he said. "You did it," I said, smiling. He didn't try it again. He just went back to the couch and picked up his controller. But he didn't put on his headset. He just sat there, quietly, for the rest of my practice. The space between us felt different, warmer, more open. The change in him was subtle, but it was there. He started to spend less time in his room and more time in the living room, even when I wasn't doing yoga. He would sit at the kitchen table while I made dinner, not saying much, just being there. He would ask me about my day and actually listen to the answer. He would tell me about a funny thing that happened in one of his games, and I would laugh, even though I didn't always get the joke. One evening, Mark came home to find us on the couch, side by side. I was reading a book and Leo was showing me a video on his phone of a particularly epic battle in his game. And then I used the ultimate ability, and it wiped out the entire team. "It was insane," he said, his voice animated with excitement. "Wow," I said, peering at the tiny screen. "That's a lot of explosions." Mark stood in the doorway, a look of pure, unadulterated shock on his face. He looked from me to Leo, and back again, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was seeing. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. "Leo's showing me how to be a hero," I said, smiling. Leo blushed, but he didn't look away. "It's just a game," he mumbled. But it wasn't just a game. And it wasn't just yoga. It was something more. It was a bridge. A way for us to cross the chasm that had separated us for so long. I still do my yoga every morning in the living room, and Leo is still usually on the couch, his controller in his hand. But now, it's different. It's not a performance, it's not a battle, it's just our morning. Sometimes he'll join in his own way. He'll try a pose or two, usually with a running commentary about how it relates to some obscure character in some obscure game. Sometimes he'll just watch, offering quiet words of encouragement, You got this. Breathe. Don't let the boss beat you. And sometimes we'll just be quiet. Two people, in the same room, doing their own thing but sharing the same space, the same air, the same quiet understanding. The wall is still there, I think, but now it has a door. And sometimes he opens it and lets me in. And sometimes I open it and let him in. I never thought I'd say this, but my yoga practice is better now than it's ever been. It's stronger, more focused, more meaningful. Because it's not just about me anymore. It's about us. It's about finding peace, not in spite of the chaos, but right in the middle of it. It's about finding your balance, not in a silent, empty room, but in a living room filled with the sounds of digital dragons and a teenage boy's laughter. I did yoga in front of my stepson, and he joined in. In his own way, he didn't unroll a mat. He didn't learn the Sanskrit names for the poses. He didn't find his inner peace in the same way I did. But he found a way to be present. He found a way to connect. He found a way to meet me in the middle. And in the end, that's the only pose that really matters.